The late afternoon sun cast long, dancing shadows across the shimmering turquoise water of the Silver Lake Estate's pool. Chlorine hung faintly in the air, a sterile counterpoint to the sweet scent of honeysuckle drifting from a nearby trellis. Darius Roland leaned back on a lounge chair, the vinyl cool against his skin. He closed his eyes, the rhythmic splash of a child's playful kicks in the shallow, and a soothing backdrop to the quiet hum of a Saturday afternoon. He'd promised none, his sister, he'd take a break. Burnout's a real thing, Darius, she'd warned, her voice laced with concern. He'd felt a familiar prickle of resistance, the ingrained habit of pushing himself, but her words had resonated with an uncomfortable truth. He was tired. The weight of the badge, the constant pressure, the never-ending fight for justice, it was a heavy burden. Today, he'd chosen to shed it, at least for a few hours. A shadow fell across his face, disrupting the fragile peace. He opened his eyes, squinting against the sudden brightness. A woman, her face etched with a mixture of suspicion and disapproval, stood over him. He recognized her vaguely, one of the residents he'd seen at the HOA meetings. Brenda, he recalled. Her blonde hair was pulled back tightly, not a strand out of place, mirroring the rigid set of her jaw. He felt a familiar tightening in his chest, a preemptive weariness settling in before she even spoke. He knew that look. He'd seen it too many times. A flicker of annoyance sparked within him, quickly extinguished by a practiced composure. Let go, Darius, he reminded himself. It's not worth it. Excuse me, Brenda began, her voice crisp and edged with an implicit accusation. Do you live here? Her eyes scanned him, a quick, dismissive inventory of his appearance. Darius registered the subtle shift in her stance, the way her hand instinctively clutched her oversized tote bag, as if preparing for a confrontation. He felt a sigh forming in his chest, a silent testament to the ingrained weariness he carried. Here we go again, he thought. Aloud, he responded simply yes. He kept his tone even neutral. No need to escalate. Not yet. He saw a flicker of disbelief cross her face. You rent here? She pressed, the question dripping with condescension. He felt a surge of irritation, a hot, prickly sensation spreading through his veins. He fought to suppress it, reminding himself of his resolve to maintain his composure. I own the place on Ashby Drive, he stated calmly, meeting her gaze directly. The words hung in the air, a stark contrast to the casual pleasantries usually exchanged poolside. He watched her face, searching for a flicker of recognition, a hint of apology. Instead, he saw her expression harden. A complex cocktail of emotions swirled within him: frustration, disappointment, a weary resignation. He'd hoped, foolishly perhaps, that his position, his title, would afford him a modicum of respect, a shield against the insidious prejudice that seemed to permeate even the most idyllic settings. He realized, not for the first time, that the badge he wore, the uniform he donned, often served as a target rather than a safeguard. A man's voice broke the tense silence. Everything all right, Brenda? Darius turned to see a tall, athletic man approaching, a towel draped casually around his neck. Ty, he remembered, another resident from the community. He lived a few houses down from him. Brenda turned, her face flushed, a mixture of annoyance and embarrassment coloring her cheeks. This gentleman, she stammered, gesturing vaguely towards Darius, claims to live here. I just wanted to make sure. Her voice trailed off weakly, the initial confidence replaced by a wavering uncertainty. Ty's eyes flicked between Brenda and Darius, his expression unreadable. Darius is our chief of police, Ty stated simply, his voice calm and even. The words landed with the weight of a gavel, shattering the fragile facade of Brenda's composure. Darius watched as the blood drained from her face, leaving her pale and shaken. A ripple of murmurs spread through the pool area, the quiet tranquility of the afternoon abruptly disrupted. A teenage girl, perched on the edge of the diving board, her phone clutched in her hand, had been filming the entire exchange. Haley, Marcus's daughter, Darius recalled. He'd seen her practicing dives earlier, her movements graceful and precise. Now, her eyes were wide, fixated on the unfolding drama. Her fingers moved swiftly, capturing the scene, broadcasting it to the world. Darius felt a strange detachment, as if he were watching the scene unfold from a distance. He knew what was coming: the viral storm, the public scrutiny, the inevitable media frenzy. He closed his eyes briefly, bracing himself. "Chief Roland," Brenda stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes darted nervously around, seeking an escape from the sudden, uncomfortable spotlight. Shame radiated from her, palpable as the chlorine in the air. He saw a flicker of genuine remorse in her eyes, a glimmer of understanding. He opened his eyes, his gaze softening slightly. He didn't want to humiliate her, not truly. His purpose was not to shame, but to illuminate, to expose the insidious nature of prejudice that lurked beneath the surface of polite society. "It's all right, ma'am," he said, his voice low and steady. "It's a common mistake." His words were measured, carefully chosen. He could have pressed the issue, could have demanded an apology, could have used this opportunity to publicly shame her. But he didn't. He wanted more than an apology. He wanted change. He wanted a world where his skin color didn't automatically mark him as an outsider, a suspect. Later that evening, his phone buzzed with notifications. The video had gone viral. Messages poured in expressions of support, outrage, condemnation. Marcus, Haley's father, sent a heartfelt message. "Thank you for handling that with such grace, Darius. You're a true role model." He read the message, a flicker of warmth spreading through him. He knew the video would spark debate, ignite controversy. But he hoped, above all, that it would spark conversation, a dialogue about the assumptions we make, the biases we harbor, the unconscious prejudices that shape our interactions with the world around us. He looked out the window at the quiet street, the houses bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. The quiet serenity of the evening was deceptive, masking the undercurrents of tension that simmered beneath the surface. He knew the fight was far from over, but he also knew that silence was complicity. He would continue to speak out, to challenge the status quo, to strive for a world where everyone felt safe, seen, and respected. The chlorine scent hung heavy in the humid Alabama air, clinging to Darius's skin like a second layer. He closed his eyes, the gentle lapping of the water against the pool's edge, a soothing rhythm against the rising tension he felt emanating from the woman who stood rigidly before him. Her arms, crossed tightly, seemed to vibrate with barely contained fury. He'd hoped his initial calm response would diffuse the situation, but the set of her jaw, the way her nostrils flared with each inhale, told a different story. He could practically feel the judgment radiating off her like heat from the pavement. Why the performative outrage? He thought, a weariness settling in his bones. Is it truly so difficult to believe I belong here? "I've already told you," he said, his voice even and measured, a practice calm he employed daily in his professional life. "I live here." Number 14. He forced himself to maintain eye contact, refusing to be intimidated by her thinly veiled accusations. Brenda's eyes, two chips of ice, scanned him from head to toe, lingering a beat too long on his skin. Her internal monologue was a whirlwind of suspicion and self-justification. He looks too casual, too relaxed. The image of her neighbor, a retired judge, meticulous in his appearance even by the pool, flashed through her mind. This man, with his simple swim trunks and worn towel, didn't fit her preconceived notion of what a resident of Oak Haven Estates should look like. He's probably lying, trying to pull a fast one. She'd heard stories, whispers of break-ins in neighboring communities. This had to be one of them. "I'm calling the clubhouse right now," she announced, her voice clipped and sharp, each word a pointed jab. "If you're lying, you're going to have a big problem." The threat hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Darius felt a flicker of annoyance, a spark he quickly extinguished. He knew this dance. He'd seen it played out countless times, in different settings, with different players. The script was always the same. He was just tired of playing his assigned role. "This woman doesn't even know me," he thought, Yet she's already decided I'm a threat. The injustice of it chafed a familiar burn. He inhaled deeply, reminding himself to stay calm, to be the bigger person. It was a burden he carried, the weight of representation, the expectation of composure. Across the pool, a man, Ty, lowered his newspaper, his gaze fixed on the unfolding scene. He recognized Darius, had seen him around the neighborhood a few times. He'd even introduced himself once during a community barbecue. What's Brenda doing? He wondered, and not forming in his stomach. He'd seen that look on her face before, the self-righteous indignation that usually preceded some unpleasant interaction. He knew Darius didn't deserve whatever was coming. A splash broke the tense silence. Haley, a teenager engrossed in her phone, paused her scrolling, her attention caught by the raised voices. Intrigued, she lifted her phone, her finger hovering over the record button. This could be interesting, she thought, a mischievous glint in her eye. She pressed record, capturing the scene unfolding before her. The shimmering turquoise water, the stark white lounge chairs, and the two figures locked in a silent battle of wills. It was all there, framed within the small screen of her phone. Brenda's voice, tight with suspicion, sliced through the air. Security? There's a man at the pool, yes. He claims he lives here, but I don't recognize him. He's refusing to leave, yes. I'll wait here. She snapped the phone shut, her eyes narrowed slits of suspicion focused on Darius. He's definitely lying, she thought, her conviction hardening. I'll make sure he regrets this. Darius sighed inwardly. This was getting ridiculous. He reached into his pocket, retrieving his badge, the cool metal a comforting weight in his palm. He held it up, the silver glinting in the afternoon sun. Chief of Police, Darius Roland. I believe this should clear up any confusion. His voice remained calm, yet there was a subtle steel beneath the surface. The air thickened, the tension palpable. Brenda's face, previously flushed with anger, paled. Her eyes widened, disbelief etched across her features. The phone slipped from her grasp, landing with a soft thud on the concrete. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Chief of Police? The words echoed in her mind, hollow and dissonant. She stared at the badge, then at Darius, her mind struggling to reconcile the image she'd constructed with the reality before her. Shame, hot and prickly, crawled up her neck, staining her cheeks crimson. Ty, witnessing the scene, let out a low whistle. Damn, he thought, Brenda just messed with the wrong guy. He walked towards them, a sense of protectiveness rising within him. He needed to do something, to say something. He stopped a few feet away, offering Darius a supportive nod. Everything all right, Chief? He asked, his voice laced with respect. Darius gave him a small, grateful smile. Everything's fine, Ty, he replied, his gaze shifting back to Brenda, who stood frozen, her face a mask of mortification. Across the pool, Haley, still recording, gasped audibly. The Chief of Police? Her mind raced, processing the implications. This wasn't just interesting anymore, this was huge. She stopped recording, her heart pounding in her chest. Later that evening, as Darius sat on his porch, the crickets chirping a soothing symphony, his phone buzzed with a notification. It was his sister, Nunn. Saw the video, D. You handled that perfectly. So proud of you. He smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that reached his eyes. He knew Nunn understood the weight he carried, the constant pressure to be flawless, to be the example. Another notification. This time, it was a message from Marcus, Haley's father. Chief Roland, just wanted to say thank you for how you handled the situation at the pool today. My daughter recorded the whole thing. It's going viral. You're a true role model. Darius stared at the message, a complex mix of emotions swirling within him. He hadn't sought the spotlight, hadn't wanted this kind of attention. But perhaps, he thought, perhaps this was an opportunity. An opportunity to spark a conversation, to challenge perceptions, to make a real difference. The weariness he'd felt earlier began to dissipate, replaced by a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this incident could be a catalyst for change. He closed his eyes, the gentle Alabama breeze carrying the scent of jasmine and the distant murmur of the ocean, a quiet promise of a new dawn. The chlorine scent, usually a comforting summer aroma, now hung heavy in the air, thick with unspoken tension. Darius Roland remained seated, the water lapping against his chest, his gaze fixed on the shimmering turquoise surface. The initial prickle of annoyance had subsided, replaced by a weary resignation. He knew this feeling, the weight of unwarranted suspicion, the burden of representation. He closed his eyes briefly, willing himself to remain calm, to be the bigger person, to be the example. Brenda's voice, shrill and accusatory, had drawn the attention of other residents lounging around the pool. Their casual conversations faded, replaced by hushed whispers and curious stares. Darius could feel their eyes on him, assessing, judging, waiting. He was acutely aware of the tableau. They were witnessing a black man, alone, being confronted by a white woman in a predominantly white community. The familiar tightness in his chest returned. Not this again, he thought, the words a silent echo in the chambers of his heart. Brenda tapped her foot impatiently, her arms crossed tight against her chest. The initial flush of righteous indignation was beginning to fade, replaced by a nagging unease. The man in the pool remained unervingly calm, his posture relaxed, his expression unreadable. It was unsettling. She had expected anger, defensiveness, perhaps even fear. This composure it threw her off balance. She glanced around, seeking validation from the other residents, but their faces were a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Had she overreacted? The thought flickered in her mind, quickly dismissed. No, she was doing the right thing, protecting her community. But a seed of doubt had been planted. Ty, a resident Darius vaguely recognized from community meetings, approached the edge of the pool. He addressed Darius, his voice low but firm. "Everything all right, Chief Roland?" The simple acknowledgement, the use of his title, was a subtle but powerful shift in the dynamics. It was a public declaration of allegiance, a quiet rebuke to Brenda's accusations. Brenda's eyes widened. "Chief Roland?" The words echoed in her mind, each syllable a hammer blow against the fragile wall of her certainty. Her breath hitched. Could it be? The chief of police? Here? In her pool? The blood drained from her face, leaving her feeling lightheaded and nauseous. The whispers around the pool intensified, carrying snippets of disbelief and dawning comprehension. Brenda felt a wave of shame wash over her, hot and suffocating. Her carefully constructed world of order and assumptions was crumbling around her. Darius opened his eyes, the turquoise water blurring slightly. He pushed himself up, the water cascading down his broad shoulders. He met Brenda's gaze, his expression calm, his voice even. "I appreciate your concern for the neighborhood, but next time you might want to ask questions before making assumptions." The words, though spoken quietly, carried a weight that silenced the murmuring crowd. Each word was carefully chosen, measured, devoid of anger, but laced with the quiet authority of his position. He could have unleashed his frustration, his disappointment, his justifiable anger. He could have humiliated her publicly, but that wasn't his way. He knew that anger begets anger. He chose a different path, a path of quiet dignity, a path that aimed for understanding, however difficult. He wasn't just a black man being wrongly accused. He was the chief of police, and his actions carried a greater significance. He was setting an example, not just for the residents of this gated community, but for the city he served. Brenda stammered, I mean," her words trailed off, lost in a mortified realization of her mistake. Her mind raced, replaying the events of the last few minutes, each moment now painted with the harsh brushstrokes of her prejudice. She had jumped to conclusions, based on nothing but the color of his skin. The shame was a physical ache, a knot in her stomach that tightened with each passing second. A teenage girl, Haley, stood near the shallow end, her phone held aloft, recording the entire exchange. Her fingers flew across the screen, adding a caption, "Racial profiling at its finest. Even the chief of police isn't immune." With a tap, she uploaded the video to social media, unaware of the ripple effect it would create. Marcus, Haley's father, watched the scene unfold with a mixture of anger and admiration. He approached Darius, extending his hand. "Chief Roland, I apologize for this unpleasantness. I appreciate how you handled the situation." His words were sincere, a balm against the sting of Brenda's accusations. Darius grasped Marcus's hand, a small, tired smile touching his lips. "Thank you, Marcus. It's a learning opportunity for everyone, I hope." His gaze swept over the assembled residents, each face now etched with varying degrees of discomfort, embarrassment, and perhaps a flicker of understanding. Later that evening, after the pool had emptied and the sun had dipped below the horizon, Darius sat on his porch, the rhythmic creak of the swing a soothing counterpoint to the turmoil of the day. His phone buzzed with messages from colleagues, from friends, from his sister, none, all expressing their support and outrage. He scrolled through them, a weariness settling deep in his bones. He knew this one incident, however public, was just a drop in the ocean. The fight for equality, for understanding, was a long and arduous one. But he also knew he couldn't give up. He had a responsibility, not just as a police officer, but as a human being. He had to keep pushing, keep striving for a world where assumptions didn't dictate actions, where prejudice didn't cloud judgment, where everyone, regardless of the color of their skin, could enjoy a quiet afternoon at the pool without being questioned, without being judged. The muted glow of the morning sun filtered through the blinds, casting long stripes across the living room floor. Darius Roland sat on his sofa, a mug of lukewarm coffee forgotten in his hand. The quiet hum of the air conditioning was a stark contrast to the storm raging in his mind, a storm fueled by pixels and public opinion. His phone buzzed incessantly, a relentless vibration against the mahogany coffee table. News alerts, messages, online comments, the digital world had exploded overnight. He'd known posting the video might stir things up, create ripples. He hadn't anticipated a tsunami. This is the price, he thought, the familiar tightness settling in his chest, the price of visibility. He hadn't sought this spotlight, this sudden, unwanted fame. He'd simply wanted a quiet afternoon at the pool. Just a quiet afternoon. The irony wasn't lost on him. He picked up the phone, his thumb hovering over the screen. He could see the notification previews, snippets of headlines, fragments of conversations, all centered around him. Part of him, a small, weary part, wanted to throw the device across the room, to retreat into the blessed silence before the world had decided he was its latest cause célèbre. Yet another part, a stubborn, insistent voice, whispered that this was important. This cacophony, this digital din, it was a conversation, albeit a messy one, about something that mattered. He clicked open a news article. The headline screamed, "Mobile Police Chief Confronted in Racially Charged Incident." He scrolled through the text, the words blurring into a meaningless jumble. He'd read similar articles countless times, the names and locations changing, but the underlying narrative eerily familiar. He'd seen the comments too, the predictable vitriol, the accusations, the defenses. He closed his eyes, the digital noise replaced by the echo of Brenda's voice, sharp and accusatory, ringing in his ears. He could still feel the weight of her gaze, the sting of her assumptions. She saw my skin, not me. The thought was a familiar ache, a dull throb beneath his ribs. He'd carried it for years, this invisible burden of preconceived notions. He wondered if Brenda even realized the weight of her words, the casual cruelty of her assumptions. Did she understand the cumulative effect of these microaggressions, the slow erosion of dignity they inflicted? He sighed, the breath heavy in his chest. He didn't want to hate her. He wanted her to understand. A knock on the door startled him. He hadn't expected visitors. None, his sister, was due later that afternoon. He pushed himself up from the sofa, a sudden wave of apprehension washing over him. He opened the door, bracing himself for another reporter, another camera flash. It was Brenda. She stood on his porch, her face pale, her eyes rimmed with red. The confident, almost arrogant woman from the poolside was gone, replaced by someone who looked smaller. Vulnerable. He felt a flicker of surprise, a loosening of the tension that had coiled in his gut. She clutched a small, white box in her hands, her knuckles bone-white. The morning air was still, thick with unspoken words. Darius felt a wave of conflicting emotions wash over him. Anger, weariness, and a hesitant flicker of hope. He could see the unspoken plea in her eyes, the silent apology trembling on her lips. He stepped aside, wordlessly inviting her in. She entered hesitantly, her eyes darting around the room, taking in the simple furnishings, the framed photos on the walls. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, until it was broken by the soft click of the door closing behind her. She stood awkwardly in the center of the living room, the small white box still clutched in her hands. Chief Roland, her voice was barely a whisper, the sharp edges softened, raw with emotion. He could see the tears welling up in her eyes, the tremor in her lower lip. I wanted to come by in person. He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. The anger, the weariness, it was all still there, simmering beneath the surface. But there was something else too, a nascent understanding, a flicker of empathy that surprised even him. He gestured towards the sofa. "Please sit down." As she settled onto the plush cushions, he noticed the slight trembling of her hands. The white box rested on her lap, a silent offering. He remained standing, his arms crossed loosely over his chest, his gaze steady. The silence stretched again, punctuated only by the soft hum of the air conditioning. He wondered what words she could possibly offer, what apology could bridge the chasm that had opened between them. He waited, patient, his inner turmoil a tempest hidden beneath a calm exterior. The morning light, filtering through the blinds, illuminated the dust motes dancing in the air, a silent testament to the passage of time, the slow, inevitable unfolding of events. He knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that this conversation, this unexpected visit, was just the beginning. The muted clinking of ice against glass echoed in the otherwise quiet kitchen. Darius swirled the amber liquid in his tumbler, the bourbon's scent a familiar comfort. He'd showered, the chlorine smell of the community pool thoroughly washed away, but the residue of the afternoon lingered, a prickly unease beneath his skin. He could still feel the weight of Brenda's gaze, the sting of her accusation, the ripple of murmurs from the onlookers. He took a slow sip, the burn a stark contrast to the cool indifference he'd maintained at the pool. "She'll come," a voice whispered in his mind, a quiet certainty that settled in the pit of his stomach. He hadn't given her his address, hadn't even hinted at wanting an apology, yet he knew. Perhaps it was a policeman's intuition, or perhaps it was simply the universal language of guilt. The doorbell chimed, a two-note melody that cut through the quiet hum of the refrigerator. He set the glass down, the ice clicking softly against the crystal, a small, brittle sound that mirrored the tension coiling in his chest. Deep breaths, Darius. It's just a conversation. He opened the door, the warm evening air tinged with the scent of honeysuckle and freshly cut grass, a stark contrast to the storm brewing within him. Brenda stood on his porch, her shoulders slumped, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Her eyes, red-rimmed and swollen, met his. He saw the shame etched on her face, a raw vulnerability that disarmed him. He stepped aside, a silent invitation to enter. She hesitated for a moment, her breath catching in her throat. "I don't know where to begin." Her voice was barely a whisper, frayed at the edges. He gestured towards the living room. "Come in, Mrs. Peterson. Have a seat." He watched her cross the threshold, her movements stiff and awkward, as if she were walking on eggshells. He wondered if she felt the weight of his gaze, the silent scrutiny of his home, a space she'd assumed he didn't belong in, not just at the pool, but in this entire neighborhood. She perched on the edge of the sofa, her hands still clasped tightly in her lap. He sat opposite her, the silence stretching between them, thick and heavy with unspoken words. He could hear the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, each tick a reminder of the passing time, of the moments wasted on assumptions and prejudice. "I messed up big time," she finally said, her voice choked with emotion. "You knew it then at the pool." You knew what I was thinking, you just didn't care. He tilted his head, studying her face. She thinks I didn't care? Care. He echoed the word, letting it hang in the air. Mrs. Peterson, it wasn't about caring. It was about knowing. Knowing that reacting, engaging in that moment, wouldn't change anything. It would just validate your assumptions. He paused, taking a deep breath. I've been on the receiving end of those assumptions too many times to count. It's exhausting, Mrs. Peterson. It wears you down. Her eyes widened, a flicker of understanding sparking in their depths. I didn't think about it, she stammered. It just felt off. He leaned forward, his voice softening. Off? He repeated, a hint of irony lacing his tone. What felt off, Mrs. Peterson? Was it the color of my skin? Was it the fact that I didn't fit your preconceived notion of who belongs in this neighborhood? She flinched, her gaze dropping to her hands. I don't know, she whispered, her voice barely audible. It wasn't right. He sighed, running a hand over his face. Right, he echoed, a weariness settling over him. It wasn't right. And yet, it happens every day. People make assumptions based on appearances, on biases they don't even realize they have. He paused, letting the words sink in. That's the problem, Mrs. Peterson. It's not just about the overt acts of racism. It's about the subtle, insidious prejudices that permeate our society, the ones that make people like me feel like we constantly have to prove ourselves to justify our existence. He saw a tear trickle down her cheek, a single, glistening drop that mirrored the weight of her guilt. He felt a pang of empathy, a flicker of understanding for the woman sitting before him, a woman caught in the web of her own biases. I'm so sorry, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I truly am. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I wrote this, I don't know if it means anything, but she extended the paper towards him, her hand trembling slightly. He took the letter, his fingers brushing against hers. The contact was brief, fleeting, yet it felt charged with a strange energy, a silent acknowledgement of the shared humanity that existed beneath the layers of prejudice and misunderstanding. He unfolded the paper, the crispness of the stationery a stark contrast to the turmoil swirling within him. He scanned the handwritten words, her apology, her confession, her plea for forgiveness. He looked up at her, his gaze softening. Thank you, Mrs. Peterson, he said, his voice quiet but firm. This means more than you know. He paused, a flicker of a smile playing on his lips. But what means even more is the understanding, the willingness to confront your own biases. That's where real change begins. She nodded, her eyes still glistening with tears. I want to do better, she whispered, her voice filled with a newfound resolve. He stood up, extending his hand towards her. Then let's start now, he said, his voice filled with a quiet hope, a glimmer of optimism in the face of a long and arduous journey. As she took his hand, a silent pact formed between them, a shared commitment to bridge the divide, to dismantle the walls of prejudice, one brick at a time. The chlorine scent hung heavy in the humid air, a familiar, almost comforting aroma that usually signaled relaxation. But today, the tension radiating from the gathered crowd at the community pool rippled through the placid blue water, disrupting the usual lazy afternoon calm. Darius adjusted his sunglasses, the slight movement a carefully controlled gesture in the face of the multitude of gazes fixed on him. 3 days. 3 days since the incident. 3 days of a media storm he hadn't sought, of his face plastered across news outlets and social media. A symbol of something far larger than himself. He hadn't wanted this, not the attention, not the labels. But he also knew, deep down, a quiet voice echoing in the chambers of his heart, that he couldn't let it go unanswered. The low hum of conversation died down as he approached the makeshift podium, a plastic table draped with a hastily ironed tablecloth. He could feel the weight of expectation pressing on him, a palpable force that mirrored the humidity clinging to his skin. He caught Ty's eye in the crowd, a small nod of encouragement passing between them. That small gesture, that silent understanding, anchored him. Ty, who had stood beside him that day, a silent bulwark against the rising tide of prejudice. His presence a quiet testament to the fact that not everyone subscribed to the narrative Brenda had so readily crafted. He placed his hands on the table, the cool plastic a stark contrast to the heat building in his palms. His fingers traced the edge of a small, almost invisible crack, a microcosm, he thought, of the fractured reality they all inhabited. He cleared his throat, the sound amplified by the microphone. He saw Haley, the teenager who'd filmed the encounter, standing near the back, her phone held loosely in her hand. He wondered what she was thinking now, what her internal dialogue was narrating as she observed the aftermath of her actions. A part of him, a small, cynical part, wondered if she regretted posting the video, not for its content, but for the fallout it had created. He pushed the thought aside. It didn't matter. What mattered was what happened next. "Good afternoon, everyone," he began, his voice steady, measured, despite the internal turmoil. His words were chosen with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel, each syllable meant to dissect the festering wound of prejudice that had been laid bare. What happened this weekend wasn't new, it was just caught on camera. He paused, letting the words hang in the air, allowing them to settle into the consciousness of the listeners. He saw Brenda, standing near the edge of the crowd, her face pale, her eyes downcast. He felt a flicker of something, not anger, not even resentment, but a profound sadness. A sadness for the lost opportunities, for the bridges not built, for the assumptions that had shaped their interaction. For every incident caught on film, he continued, his voice gaining strength, there are countless others that happen in the shadows, unseen, unheard, but no less real. He closed his eyes for a fleeting moment, conjuring images of his own past, of the times he'd been judged, assessed, dismissed based solely on the color of his skin. The sting of those memories, though dulled by time, still resonated within him, a constant reminder of the battles yet to be fought. "It's easy to point fingers, to assign blame," he said, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. "It's much harder to look inwards, to examine our own biases, to confront our own prejudices." He saw a few heads nod in agreement, small glimmers of hope in the sea of uncertainty. "When you feel the urge to confront, pause," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, forcing the crowd to lean in, to truly listen. "When you feel the urge to accuse, ask. When you feel the urge to assume, stop yourself." He felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him, the weight of the past few days settling heavily on his shoulders. He thought of his sister, Nun, her unwavering support a constant source of strength. He knew she was watching the live stream, her presence a silent affirmation of his actions. He concluded his statement, a plea for dialogue, for understanding, for a collective effort to build a better future. As the applause rippled through the crowd, a mixture of genuine appreciation and polite obligation, Darius felt a sense of cautious optimism. He knew this was just the beginning, a single step on a long and arduous journey. He knew that changing hearts and minds wouldn't be easy, that the deeply ingrained prejudices wouldn't vanish overnight. But he also knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that he had to try. Later that evening, as he sat on his porch, the last vestiges of the day fading into twilight, Darius received a text from Marcus, Haley's father. "Thank you," it read, the simple words carrying a weight of unspoken gratitude. Darius closed his eyes, the tension slowly ebbing away. The viral video, the unwanted attention, the public scrutiny, it had all been worth it, if even just one person, one family, had been touched by his message. He knew the road ahead would be challenging, but he also knew, with a renewed sense of purpose, that he wasn't alone. He wasn't alone in this fight. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across his living room floor, painting the walls with a warm, honeyed light. Darius Roland sat on his worn leather couch, the silence of his home pressing in on him like a physical weight. He wasn't accustomed to this quiet. Usually, Nun's laughter echoed through the halls, punctuating the comfortable rhythm of their shared life. But she was out, visiting a friend, leaving him alone with the ghosts of the day. The pool, the woman's accusing voice, the murmurs of the gathering crowd it played on a continuous loop in his mind. He'd practiced restraint, chosen calm over anger, but beneath the surface, a deep weariness tugged at him. He reached for his phone, the cool glass a stark contrast to the burning tension in his chest. The video. He hadn't watched it yet. Part of him dreaded seeing the raw footage, reliving the humiliation, the subtle sting of prejudice laid bare for all to see. Yet, another part of him, a colder, more analytical part, understood its importance. Evidence. A testament. A mirror held up to a society still grappling with its shadows. With a deep breath, he clicked play. The familiar scene unfolded on the small screen. The woman, Brenda, her face contorted with a mixture of suspicion and entitlement. Her words, sharp and accusatory, echoed in the quiet of his home. He saw himself, his own face an impassive mask, his voice even and controlled. He watched the subtle shift in Brenda's demeanor, the dawning realization, the shame creeping into her eyes. Then the other voices joined the chorus tie's firm support, Marcus's quiet gratitude, and Haley, the teenager, her phone held steady, capturing the entire exchange with an unsettling detachment. He closed his eyes, the weight of it all pressing down on him. This wasn't just about him. It was about every black man who'd ever been unfairly judged, every whispered suspicion, every sideways glance. It was about the exhaustion of constantly having to prove your worth, your belonging. His phone buzzed with incoming notifications, a relentless stream of emails, messages, news alerts. He scrolled through them, a strange mix of emotions swirling within him. Support poured in from unexpected corners, messages of solidarity from across the country, even internationally. "We stand with you, Chief Roland. Thank you for your grace under pressure. This is our fight, too." He saw excerpt from the video splashed across news websites, analyzed by commentators, dissected by social media users. The incident, once confined to the chlorine-scented air of a community pool, had now become a national conversation. A turning point, some called it. A moment of reckoning. He felt a flicker of hope, a fragile ember in the darkness. Perhaps, just perhaps, this could be a catalyst for real change. But the hope was intertwined with a deep sense of unease. He knew the fleeting nature of viral outrage, the fickle attention span of the internet. He knew that the spotlight would eventually fade, the hashtags would disappear, and the underlying issues would remain. "Your strength is inspiring, Darius." Nun's voice startled him. He hadn't heard her come in. She stood in the doorway, her face a mixture of concern and pride. "I saw the video. I'm so sorry you had to go through that." He offered a weary smile. It's a lot to process." Nun crossed the room and sat beside him, her presence a comforting anchor in the storm. "You did the right thing," she said softly, her hand resting on his arm. "You always do." Her words, simple yet profound, resonated deep within him. He leaned back against the couch, closing his eyes for a moment, letting the silence wash over him. This time, it wasn't the oppressive silence of solitude, but the comforting silence of shared understanding. He opened his eyes, his gaze meeting Nun's. "I'm tired," he admitted, the words heavy with unspoken meaning. "I know," Nun replied, her voice laced with empathy. "But you're not alone." He knew she was right. He wasn't alone. He had Nun, his family, his community, and now a chorus of voices rising up in support. He picked up his phone again, scrolling through the endless stream of messages. One email in particular caught his eye. It was from Brenda, the woman at the pool. He hesitated for a moment, his finger hovering over the screen. He wasn't sure he was ready to face her words, to confront the raw emotions that lay beneath her initial prejudice. But he knew he had to. He took a deep breath and opened the email. "Chief Roland," it began, the words stiff and formal. "I'm writing to express my deepest apologies for my behavior at the pool yesterday. I acted out of ignorance and prejudice, and I'm truly ashamed of my actions. I understand that my words caused you pain and humiliation, and for that, I am deeply sorry. I hope that one day you can find it in your heart to forgive me." He read the words over and over again, searching for sincerity, for genuine remorse. He couldn't know for sure if her apology was truly heartfelt or simply a response to the public backlash. But he chose to believe, to hold onto the possibility of redemption. He closed his eyes, picturing Brenda's face, the shame in her eyes, the tremor in her voice as she realized her mistake. He thought of the countless others who harbored similar prejudices, unconscious biases that shaped their perceptions and actions. This wasn't just about one woman's apology. It was about the potential for change, the possibility of bridging divides, of fostering understanding and empathy. He opened his eyes, a new resolve hardening within him. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. He typed a reply, his fingers moving slowly across the screen. "Ms. Lewis," he wrote, "thank you for your apology. I believe in the power of education and dialogue to overcome prejudice. I hope that this incident can serve as a learning opportunity for us all." He paused, considering his next words carefully. "I am willing to meet with you, if you're open to a conversation." He hit send, a quiet sense of purpose settling within him. The fight for equality, for justice, for understanding, it was a long and arduous journey. But he was ready to walk it, one step at a time. The humid Alabama air hung heavy, a damp blanket draped over the screened-in porch. The rhythmic creak of the swing was a familiar lullaby, a counterpoint to the cicadas buzzing in the sprawling oak trees beyond the yard. Darius Roland watched the last embers of the sunset bleed across the sky, painting the clouds in hues of bruised orange and fading violet. His mind, however, was fixed on the stark white glare of a different scene, the harsh fluorescence of the community pool, the accusing finger pointed in his direction. He took a long swallow of iced tea, the clinking ice a brittle sound in the gathering dusk. The sweetness did little to wash away the lingering bitterness. Several days had passed since the incident. The video had gone viral. The apologies had been issued, but the residue remained, clinging to him like the humidity. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Nun's voice was soft, her presence a familiar comfort in the stillness of the evening. She settled into the wicker chair beside him, her own glass of tea perspiring in the muggy air. Darius exhaled slowly, the tension held captive in his shoulders easing slightly. Just thinking about everything that happened. He wasn't thinking about everything. He was fixated on Brenda's face, contorted in a mask of prejudice and fear, then later crumpling into a tearful apology. The shift was jarring, a disturbing testament to the power of public opinion. Then reached out, her hand covering his. The warmth of her touch was grounding. "I still can't believe she did that. In broad daylight. Like you were some criminal." Her voice vibrated with indignation, a protective anger that Darius knew stemmed from years of witnessing similar subtle, and not so subtle, acts of discrimination. He squeezed her hand, offering a small, tired smile. "Believe it. It happens." He thought of all the times he'd chosen to ignore similar slights, the countless microaggressions that accumulated like grains of sand, slowly eroding his sense of belonging. This time it was different. This time, a teenage girl with a phone had captured the ugliness, exposed it to the harsh light of day. But why? None persisted, her brow furrowed in frustration. Why do they do it? What makes them think they have a right? Darius swirled the remaining ice in his glass, the clinking a hollow echo of his own weariness. They never see us as normal, none. He looked out at the fireflies beginning to flicker in the twilight, their tiny lights fragile against the vastness of the night. Just tired, threatening. Nun's silence was heavy, laden with unspoken understanding. They both knew what it meant to navigate a world where their skin color was often seen as a liability, a mark of suspicion. Years of carefully constructed composure, of meticulously chosen words and measured actions, all designed to avoid the very confrontation that had ultimately found him. The irony was not lost on him. "You handled it well, Darius," Nin said softly, her voice filled with a mix of pride and concern. "Everyone's saying so. Even Marcus down the street. He told me how much he admired your restraint." He gave a short, humorless laugh. Restraint. That's what they call it. He thought of the simmering anger he'd kept banked down, the tight control he'd maintained over his voice, his body language. The effort had been exhausting, a performance for an audience he hadn't asked for. It's more than restraint, Darius, Nun countered, her voice firm. It's strength. It's grace. It's what makes you who you are. He looked at her, a flicker of genuine warmth replacing the weariness in his eyes. He appreciated her fierce loyalty, her unwavering belief in him. He knew she wanted him to feel vindicated, to feel that the apologies and the viral outrage somehow balanced the scales. But the truth was, the incident had stirred something deeper, a profound sense of disillusionment that he couldn't easily shake off. It changes nothing, Nun, he said quietly, his voice laced with a melancholic resignation. One viral video, a few apologies, it doesn't erase years of this. Years of being treated like I don't belong. Nun's hand tightened around his. I know, but to start, right? People are talking. They're seeing it. Maybe some minds will change. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to believe that this one incident, captured in the cold, impersonal lens of a smartphone camera, could somehow be a catalyst for real change. But a lifetime of experience had taught him to be cautious, to temper his hope with a healthy dose of skepticism. Maybe, he conceded, the word hanging in the air between them, heavy with unspoken doubts and lingering uncertainties. He looked out at the night sky again, the stars now fully visible, their distant light a reminder of the vastness of the universe, the insignificance of his own struggles in the grand scheme of things. And yet, those struggles felt so real, so immediate, so profoundly personal. Don't carry all of it, Darius, Nun said softly, her voice breaking the silence. It's not yours to carry alone. She leaned her head against his shoulder, a gesture of comfort and solidarity. I'm proud of you, she whispered, the words a balm to his weary soul. He closed his eyes, breathing in the scent of honeysuckle and damp earth, the familiar smells of home. He knew she was right. He couldn't carry the weight of the world on his shoulders. He couldn't single-handedly dismantle centuries of prejudice and discrimination. But he could continue to be who he was, to live with integrity, to fight for justice, one quiet act of defiance at a time. And perhaps, just perhaps, that would be enough. The faintest flicker of hope, like the fireflies dancing in the darkness, began to glow within him. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Darius's lawn, painting the freshly cut grass a vibrant emerald. He sat on his porch swing, the rhythmic creak a soothing counterpoint to the chirping crickets. A glass of sweet tea, condensation clinging to the outside, sat on the small table beside him. He wasn't watching the neighborhood kids chase fireflies. He was seeing Brenda's face, the initial haughty confidence crumbling into bewildered shame. The memory, though unpleasant, held a certain satisfaction. Not the kind born of vengeance, but the quiet satisfaction of a hard lesson learned. He hoped she truly understood. He hoped it would be different next time, not just for him, but for anyone who might face a similar situation. The gentle clink of the gate latch broke his reverie. He looked up, recognizing Marcus, one of his neighbors, approaching with his teenage daughter, Haley, trailing slightly behind. A flicker of unease touched him. Was this about the pool incident? Was there more fallout he hadn't anticipated? He forced a casual smile. Afternoon, Marcus. Haley. Darius. Marcus greeted, his voice warm and genuine. We wanted to stop by and say hello. He paused, a slight hesitation in his tone. And thank you. Darius's brow furrowed slightly. Thank him? For what? Being humiliated? He glanced at Haley. Her gaze was fixed on the ground, her fingers fidgeting with the strap of her backpack. Something about her posture, the nervous energy radiating from her, sparked a realization. The video. It had to be about the video. He'd heard it had gone viral, but hadn't had the heart to watch it himself. His sister, Nun, had filled him in, her voice tight with a mixture of anger and pride. He swallowed, the sweet tea suddenly tasting bitter. Haley, Marcus said, his voice gentle but firm, tell Chief Roland what you told me. Haley's head snapped up, her eyes meeting his for a fleeting moment before darting away again. "I filmed what happened at the pool," she mumbled, her cheeks flushing crimson. "I posted it online." Darius felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He had known it was coming, but hearing it confirmed still sent a wave of discomfort through him. He wasn't used to being the center of attention, especially not in this way. His job was to maintain order, to be the invisible hand of justice, not the subject of a viral video. "You did," he acknowledged, his voice carefully neutral. He watched her, searching for any sign of malice, of the gleeful voyeurism that often accompanied such recordings. He found none, only apprehension and a strange sort of respect. "You did the right thing," he said, the words surprising even himself. He saw a flicker of surprise in her eyes, mirrored in Marcus's expression. He continued, "It wasn't easy, I'm sure, but you documented an injustice. You gave people a chance to see what happened, to judge for themselves." Haley's shoulders visibly relaxed, the tension slowly ebbing away. A small, hesitant smile touched her lips. "I thought so, but some people online, they're saying things." Her voice trailed off, her gaze dropping to the ground again. Darius nodded, understanding the sting of online vitriol all too well. "There will always be those who disagree," he said softly. "But the truth has a way of surfacing. And what you captured, that was the truth." He turned to Marcus, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Your daughter learned a lot watching me that day," he said, his voice laced with a touch of irony. "But perhaps I learned something from her, too. The courage to stand up, to be a witness, even when it was uncomfortable." He hadn't thought about it that way before. Marcus clapped him on the shoulder, a gesture of solidarity and understanding. "We're proud of you, Darius," he said, his voice filled with genuine warmth. "This neighborhood, this city, we're lucky to have you." As they turned to leave, Haley lingered for a moment. "Thank you, Chief Roland," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, for everything." And then she was gone, following her father down the sidewalk, leaving Darius alone with his thoughts. The crickets continued their chirping serenade, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. Darius took a long sip of his tea, the sweetness now tinged with a sense of quiet triumph. The incident at the pool had been unpleasant, humiliating even, but it had also sparked something. A ripple, a small wave of understanding, of acceptance, that was slowly spreading through his community. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. He closed his eyes, a deep breath filling his lungs. He was tired, bone-tired, but a flicker of hope remained. Hope for change. Hope for a future where moments like these wouldn't be necessary. A future where everyone, regardless of their skin color, could enjoy a quiet afternoon by the pool without fear of judgment or accusation. The fight was far from over, he knew. But for now, in the quiet stillness of his porch, he allowed himself a moment of peace. The fight could wait. For now, he just wanted to breathe. The hum of the computer fan was a low, steady thrum against the silence of Darius's office. He stared at the email, the stark black letters a stark contrast against the sterile white of the screen. Viral video sparks national debate on racial profiling. He scrolled. The scrolling will cool beneath his thumb, the faint click a counterpoint to the pounding in his chest. It had been less than 48 hours since the incident at the pool, less than 48 hours since Brenda's accusations had echoed in the humid Alabama air. Now the echo had amplified, bouncing off the walls of his office, his city, the nation. A weary sigh escaped his lips, a puff of air that seemed to hang in the still air, pregnant with a weight he couldn't quite name. This wasn't what I wanted. The thought felt jarring, even to him. He had wanted change, hadn't he? He'd wanted the conversation to happen, the light to shine on the uncomfortable truths lurking beneath the surface of polite society. Yet, facing the sheer magnitude of the response, a strange disquiet settled in the pit of his stomach. He was accustomed to being in control, to navigating the intricate dance of law enforcement with a steady hand. This, though, felt different. This felt like being swept up in a current, powerful and unpredictable. He clicked open another email, a news outlet requesting an interview. Then another, and another, each one a small wave pushing him further out to sea. He rubbed his temples, the tension a tight band across his forehead. How do I steer this? The question hung heavy in the silence. He'd spent his career carefully constructing a persona of calm authority, a shield against the storms that came with his position. But this demanded something more. This demanded vulnerability, a willingness to step out from behind the shield and expose the man beneath. He pushed back from his desk, the chair rolling silently across the polished floor. The world outside his window was a blur of green and gray, the late afternoon sun casting long, slanting shadows across the streets. The rhythmic tap of his shoes against the sidewalk was a grounding presence, a small piece of normalcy in a world suddenly turned upside down. He walked without a destination, letting his feet carry him through the familiar streets of his neighborhood. The air, thick and heavy with the promise of rain, clung to him like a second skin. He could feel the stares, the whispers, the weight of unseen eyes following his every move. He was no longer just Darius Roland, chief of police. He was Darius Roland, the man in the video. He turned onto his street. The houses lined up like sentinels, each with their perfectly manicured lawns and neatly trimmed hedges. A sense of unease prickled at the edges of his awareness. This was his sanctuary, his refuge from the demands of his job. But now, even here, he felt exposed, vulnerable. He saw none on the porch, a book in her lap, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Even from this distance, he could sense her concern, the unspoken questions swirling in her eyes. She stood as he approached, the book falling onto the porch swing with a soft thud. "Darius," she said, her voice laced with a mixture of relief and apprehension. "Are you all right?" He managed a weak smile, a pale imitation of his usual reassuring grin. "I'm fine, hon. Just tired." Her eyes, sharp and perceptive, saw through the facade. "Tired doesn't explain the weight I see in your eyes," she said softly, her hand reaching out to touch his arm. "You're carrying the world, aren't you?" He leaned into her touch, the warmth of her hand a small comfort against the chill that had settled deep within him. "It feels like it sometimes," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. Inside the house, the phone rang, shrill and insistent. He felt an intense beside him. Every ring was another reminder of the storm raging outside their quiet haven. He knew he couldn't hide, couldn't ignore the calls for his attention. This incident, this small ripple at the community pool, had become a tidal wave, and he was caught in its pull. Later that evening, as he sat at the kitchen table, a mug of lukewarm tea in his hand, the silence was broken only by the soft glow of the laptop screen. He scrolled through the countless messages, emails, and news articles, each one a testament to the reach of the video. He saw the headlines, the snippets of quotes taken out of context, the swirling vortex of opinions and judgments. He saw Brenda's tearful apology on a local news channel, her words of remorse echoing the shame he had seen in her eyes at the pool. He saw Ty's interview, his unwavering support a small beacon of hope amidst the storm. He even saw a comment from Marcus, Haley's father, expressing his gratitude for the way Darius had handled the situation. It's more than just a video, he thought, a flicker of understanding igniting in his mind. It's a mirror. It was reflecting the ugliness, the bias, the ingrained prejudices that had been festering beneath the surface for far too long. But it was also reflecting the good, the empathy, the potential for change. He opened a new email, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. He knew he couldn't control the narrative, couldn't dictate how people would interpret the events. But he could use his platform, his voice, to steer the conversation towards something meaningful, something productive. He typed, the words flowing onto the screen, a carefully crafted message of hope and understanding. He invited community leaders, activists, and educators to join him in a series of town hall meetings, a space for open dialogue, a chance to confront the uncomfortable truths and work towards a better future. He hit send, a small click echoing in the quiet kitchen, a tiny ripple of hope expanding outwards into the vastness of the digital world. The weight hadn't lifted, not entirely, but for the first time since the incident, A sense of cautious optimism began to bloom in the quiet spaces between his thoughts. The journey was far from over, but he knew, with a certainty that settled deep within his bones, that this was just the beginning.